All right, so I'm gonna do the demo for the vases here. Is it on? Yeah, okay. We're gonna be using a little bit more clay. So the next assignment is the pieces have to be at least 6 inches tall. Try to get it as tall as you can. You're gonna need at least 2 pounds of clay for that. I'm gonna start out with 3. My clay, I'm actually using some recycled clay right now. It's a little on the stiff side, and you might find that it's centering something on the stiff side is a little bit more challenging. But once you get it centered, the cylinder will be a little bit more stable. So it's a matter of personal preference. If you're unable to center something that's a little bit on the stiff side, then just center, just do what you normally do. Work with softer clay. You just have to trim, maybe do a little bit of trimming later. All right, so actually let me take my watch off because that will get in the way, the taller things. Okay, so more clay, more leverage, okay? I'm gonna really lean into the clay and I'm really gonna bring this cone up. I really have my elbow braced in the side of my leg here. Okay, I'm gonna bring up my first cone. Just gonna squishing it up. I'm gonna push it down. And however you're centering, just keep on keeping on. I don't know if I mentioned, you need at least 2 pounds. This is 3. Just gonna use my left hand here just to balance things out. Okay, I like to bring up a really nice tall cone. This cone is fine. I actually like to bring it up a little taller. I feel like if I can get a really nice tall cone that's not wiggly, then I can get a nice tall, and I can push it down without making it all wiggly. I'll be able to get a really nice tall cylinder. If I want to make my cone taller, I'm going to use this part of my pinky here, at the base of my pinky, to push forward, and I'm going to keep my thumb up and on the clay, and that'll keep the clay from kind of swinging around. I'll just bring that cone up a little bit further. When I push the cone down, I'm going to kind of push forward, and instead of having my 2 hands together like this, if I just push down from the top, it's going to start doing the hula dance. Okay, it's going to start just moving in the middle. It'll kind of start swinging around. But what I can do is I can push down in the middle, or on the top, and I can pull back in the middle for a little bit of it. You can see I'm really pushing that cylinder forward. Until I get to about here, then I'm going to switch back to my normal centering position and push down. Get it good and centered. You can see I'm just doing that pretty slowly. I'm just kind of feeling the clay, allowing that clay to move down as I press it down. Okay. Now the proportion of my centered piece of clay is going to be maybe a little taller than it was before. A little bit, it's not really skinny and really tall. It's just a little bit taller proportion than normal. I'm going to drop the hole. I don't like to trim tall things. You might find that you will need to trim them. If you want to put the recessed foot on the bottom of your piece, then leave a little bit of clay. If you leave a little clay, you're going to have to trim it. It's just all there is to it. I just prefer to not do that to my tall things. Okay, drop the hole. I'm going to drop mine down to 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to open it up. And proportionally, I'm not really going to go that much further, much wider than I did for my cups or my bowls or whatever. Just a nice flat floor. If I open it up really wide, I'm going to have less clay to pull up in the wall. It's just going to be a short wide thing. So flat floor, just a hair wider than you would pull it for a cup. Okay, my volcano. Flatten that just a little bit more there. My volcano, I'm actually going to try to kind of lift that clay up a little bit. So I'm going to kind of grab on with my pinky and my knuckle there. Oh, it's getting a little sticky. I'm going to bring it up and in. And I like to bring it up and in and make a really small top. I know I'm not going to be able to get my hand in there, but it's kind of getting that clay ready to be kind of up and in. Compress the rim at this point, and you can even just kind of thin a little bit of that clay out so it's not so bulky up there. Okay. I'm gonna make this first pull, make sure your clay is really wet. I'm gonna slow my wheel down just a hair here. Okay. Clay's wet. Pushing forward and pulling back. I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive with this than I was with my other ones. I'm gonna really grab onto that groove. I'm gonna start pulling. I'm still gonna go up 1/4 inch each time the wheel goes around, but I have to use a little bit more pressure on the clay. And when I get to the top, I need to make sure that this top part of the cylinder is approximately the finished thickness. I'm not really leaving that much clay at the top. There are certain situations where you might want to leave a little bit more clay at the top, and maybe for a pitcher or something like that. I'm making a vase; it'll just have like the flared rim, so it's not going to need really any significant extra clay up there. You can see I got it really tall. It's a cone shape. It's maybe a little bit narrow for my hand. That's okay. As long as the wheel's moving, you can kind of stick your hand in there and make it a little bit wider. But again, you kind of want to get that clay moving up into a cone. It's all the outside hand's job. Okay, you got to push that clay up. Support on the inside with my my middle finger on the inside. I'm gonna make my groove. It's a pretty aggressive groove. And you can actually see where my clay is right now, like where I've left the clay. Like this top part of the cylinder, that kind of got pushed up by my hand. This top part of the cylinder is just about the thickness that I'm going to be finishing with, okay? And I have a whole bunch of clay down here. The reason for that is I don't want to make this clay really thin down at the bottom and leave a whole bunch of thick clay at the top. And if I thin the clay at the bottom and I try to pull through that clay at the top, it's just going to collapse my cylinder. So I thin the clay out at the top first, and then I pull the clay up from the bottom. And this is really where you got to pay attention to what's happening with that inside hand. That inside hand needs to, when you get to this thinner spot, is going to really back off on its pressure. You're going to continue to pull all the way to the top, but this inside hand is going to be doing a lot less work up at the top. Okay, we'll get the clay wet, inside and out. Okay, when I make my pull, notice that my elbow is not planted on my leg. It's actually stuck to the side of my body. And as I move up the cylinder, my arm moves up my body, and my body moves up and over the clay, and I end up kind of pulling towards my face. That will help keep it from collapsing on you. Okay, I'm really going to grab onto that groove. Okay, that bump on the outside is my inside hand. Okay, I'm going to lift it straight up. If you can start getting a twist in the side, that is because you're pulling the cylinder back towards you. So just move your body a little bit closer to the clay. Get the top stop, compress the rim. That first and second pull are going to get me all that clay into the cylinder. I only have a little bit of evening out to do. So just a little bit of groove down the bottom. And you can see after I did that groove, this bump right here, that's really the only clay I have to pull up into the cylinder at this point. All the other clay is really nice and even. That comes with practice. You might find that you need to do more pulls than I do. I guarantee you'll probably find you'll have more pulls than I do. Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to make sure that this elbow is kind of basically right over the center of the clay. If I have it like bent over to the side like that, I'm gonna push the cylinder right over. So you gotta get your elbow, you gotta kind of push your shoulder out, push your elbow out. I kind of lean back a little bit so I can watch the side of the clay. Okay, I'm going to grab onto that groove. Just slowly lift it up. You have to pay attention to what's happening with your forearm. I felt my forearm touching the clay there, so I had to back off the clay a little bit. Uh-oh. And sometimes you make it really thin, and I usually just try to keep going if I can, but that time I couldn't really keep going, so I had to go back and make sure that that little bump didn't collapse on me. Okay, So that's 3 pulls. My cylinder is basically finished thickness. We go in there and we get that water out before I start shaping it. Okay, I'm gonna get the excess clay off the side before I shape it. Again, I'm gonna hold this like a chopstick, sharp edge up against the piece. I'm gonna push it up there, go straight down the side. Oh, there's one rib I need actually, oops. Flip. And then to get that excess clay out, I just kind of press down. So do we have a triangle rib? Can somebody grab me a triangle rib? Please. They're on the left-hand side, yeah. Yep, that's fine. We need this in a minute. Okay, so now I'm gonna shape it. So I'm gonna get both ribs, one rib on the inside, one rib on the outside. When I was first learning how to throw, I would only have a rib on the inside and I would push the clay out. And that's a fine way to do it. I just like to compress the wall. So I'm compressing the clay. I'm removing that slip. If that slip sits on the surface, if the water sits on the surface, it's gonna absorb in and the cylinder is gonna be less substantial. You're not gonna be able to do as much shape to it. So I go from the bottom to the top and the top down to the bottom, and I'm just trying to keep the cylinder straight. I'm not trying to put any shape into it yet. You can see my body is kind of moving away from the clay as I do that. Okay, so now I have to decide what shape I want. I think I'm just gonna start shaping it. The principle here, basically, instead of like pushing out like this or pushing forward, I'm actually kind of pulling this rib back, and this one's kind of supporting. I'm flexing it a little bit to kind of accommodate the shape of the rib on the inside. Always round and round. I don't really ever use the flat sides of either of these ribs unless I totally have an airhead moment and forget that I'm actually using the wrong side of the rib. So you can see I'm just starting to gradually move this shape out. I've decided that it's going to have this size of a neck here, and that's where the shoulder is going to be. So all the parts of the pieces have sort of names. The body, there's going to be like the belly, the foot, the shoulder, the neck, the lip. I'm just going to push this out a little bit, kind of pulling that clay back towards myself. If you don't want the clay to go out, don't push it out, okay? It's really hard to get back in. It's not impossible. Sometimes it's impossible, depending on how thick your clay is. When I'm really trying to bring that out, I'm actually kind of pulling back, and I'm almost lifting that clay up with this rib on the inside. And just keep pushing it out as long as you support the outside. If I were to try to do this with the slip on the outside, it probably would start wanting to collapse. So I'd have to use a hairdryer or something. Because there's no slip on the outside, and I'm compressing the other side of the clay, I can get it to go out pretty far and hold its shape fairly well. Okay, so I have a nice shoulder there, nice belly. Kind of looking at it from the side to sort of determine what shape I need to put in here. Oh, there it goes. Sometimes that happens. And that's another little lapse in concentration. That means I got this thing a little too flat on the surface there. So I just have to spend a second more just sort of smoothing this out. All right, so I guess technically that's a vase. I'm gonna re-wet this top part. I'm not dribbling water onto it. I'm just kind of sponging it on there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna push it in just a little bit. And then I have my inside hand kind of below my outside hand, and I'm gonna kind of bring my outside hand up and over my outside hand. Just kind of flare that rim out like that. press the rim. Now, I'm seeing that I have a little bit too harsh of a shoulder there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift it up a little bit on the inside and push down the part that's kind of wanting to bulge out a little bit on me. Okay, I might use the triangle rib here just to define the shoulder. Kind of push it in a little bit. Refine that edge. Refine this lip here. I like to come out and be kind of flat. Okay, so on the bottom, you have to be able to get your hand in there. It's a little bit more stable if it's a little bit wider to start out with. You can actually push this back in a little bit if you want to. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna hold on to this. I'm just gonna push on the side here. You will scrape a little clay off. You can see I can move that in just a little bit, make it a little bit more elegant. And then I'm gonna add my foot, and I'm gonna use this part of the triangle rib here. I'm just kind of supporting the rim so it doesn't start swinging around. I'm just gonna push that foot in just a little bit. I don't need too much of a foot. Lift it up. Smooth it. Got a little chunky on there. And then I'm just going to kind of go back and define this curve under here. And if you do decide to put flowers in these things, if it has this little kind of curve that kind of goes back to almost straight up and down, that'll hold the flowers in place so they don't want to creep up the wall. So that's pretty much it. That's a vase. Let's do a little bit more shape down here. Maybe give it a little bit of movement up here so it's not dead. And that's a vase. I might recommend sliding it off. If your clay is stiff enough, you can just pick it up and set it aside. All right, good luck.